So, welcome to 10 Tips to Make UI Design Easier. A little bit about me. My name is Claudia. I currently work as a iOS engineer at a company called Jack Henry. Before that, I worked as a airline pilot for SkyWest. I am a mother of two teenage boys, and I think that's probably the hardest part about everything I've ever done is raising two boys. I live in Northern California. Never been to Toronto. First time here. I love it though. Um, love to read, crochet. We were actually talking about this last night during dinner. A lot of us that do programming in one way or another tend to turn towards some kind of creating in another aspect. And that's kind of interesting. How many of you do creation in woodworking, art, some kind of textile? Yeah, it's kind of interesting to see that. Um, yeah, recently I also discovered that yoga is kind of fun too. So during today's presentation, I want to talk to you a little bit about what design is and what it's not, how we as developers tend to make it harder on ourselves, and then tips that I've kind of discovered as I build apps, as I've worked with other people, helping them build apps, use apps, and then I have some resources that I'd like to share with you afterwards. So let's talk a little bit about design. So when you hear the word design, I bet most of us think of, colors, fonts, typography, how the app looks, right? Well, there's more to design than just that. There's also like how users interact with it. And that's kind of more of what I want to talk to you about today is that the user, uh, whatever that other word is, can't think of it right now, but not so much how it looks, but how we interact with our apps. So let's go back a little bit. Let's go back to when the internet first started. Some of us were there, some of us were probably not. But what uh, this is actually a pretty decent website from back in the 90s, and it's Disney, of course, right? Disney's are going to do things, they're going to do things right. But it's pretty basic compared to what websites look like now, I would say. Uh, one image, lots of text. And then you had websites that looked like this. Lots and lots of text, lots and lots of links. I showed this to my kids and they're like, is that Craigslist? I was like, no. This is what a lot of websites looked like back in the day. And then we had this. And yeah, bunch of just stuff everywhere. Very unorganized, I'd say. But a lot of websites had this. I don't know where the thing is. But on the column here, the navigation. Very common to have that navigation on the side. Now, a lot of the navigation's on the top, right? I'm kind of ashamed to say that when I first started to get into programming, I built a website that looked like this with a very ugly background, except mine were cats and they were animated. But this is kind of what we were limited to back when websites were first started. This is also not a bad looking one, again from Lego. Um, this kind of reminds me if when you're first getting introduced to programming, a lot of us go through it through like the HTML, CSS, JavaScript side. And when you first start with just HTML, this is kind of what your website will look like. Very, very plain, just text and images. So it kind of got me thinking when you first start building anything, iOS, Android, web, you learn the basics, right? So back when things got first started back in the 90s on the internet, did websites look the way they did because of the technology that they had? Or was it that the people that were designing them had limited skills? I don't know, maybe a combination of both. But we can't get away with things looking like some of the other ones nowadays. They have to be better looking, right? So, your first tip is what is acceptable, considered good design, is probably going to change, and it's going to change for different reasons. The technology that we're using is always changing, it's getting better, so we're capable of doing better things with it. We can add flashier animations, we can add more colors, we can add just anything. It might also change because our competition is doing something, so we need to do what they're doing, but we need to do it better. So, whatever it is that its design is considered good, it's going to change. Like you saw back in the 90s, what was acceptable, a lot of that is no longer acceptable. We can't have sites with just text, and we can't have jumbled images and text all over the place. So, what exactly is design? So, there's two parts to it: what we think about, which is the fonts, the colors, the typography, and then there's the user part, how they interact with our app. And the most important part about design is not how it looks. It's about how our users interact with our app. Because we could have the best looking app out there, but if nobody's using it, what's the point of having it, right? So the first thing we need to do when we're building our app is we need to think about how our users are going to use it. And our apps are built because we're trying to solve a problem. Whatever that problem is, we need to have our apps be able to solve it. And this is where the problem comes. And I don't know why it is, but we as developers tend to make design harder on ourselves. Maybe it's the way we learned to code, but for whatever it is, we do. So, the way I've seen it when I teach or help people learn to build an app is that they come up with an idea, right? They have this idea of something that they want to build. And then the next thing they do is they will go on like Dribbble or Behance, and they will start scrolling through the many, many beautiful designs that are on there. And then what they'll do is they'll find something and they'll find this beautiful, beautiful, because there's some really good designers out there. And they'll be like, oh, this is amazing. This is exactly what I want my app to look like. So they'll take that design and they'll fit their app idea into that design. So what happens is they've now limited this idea that could have been just limitless, and they are now limiting themselves to what this designer has built. So that's problem one. Problem two is that they have now lost the flow of their app because they're using that design. So what I tell people is instead of making step two, going on to Dribbble, make step two working on your flow. What is the most important thing? What is that problem you're trying to solve? Make that the very first thing that you want your user to see, and then kind of sketch out a rough sketch of what you want that to look like. Then go to Dribbble, Behance, or whatever other portfolio site. Look for something that kind of resembles your sketch, and then use that to build your app. Don't limit yourself to what somebody else thinks your app should look like, but use their ideas to kind of guide you. Because if you walk away with anything from my presentation today, it should be that good design is about the user experience. That's it. Because, like I said earlier, if nobody's using your app, what's the point of building it? Unless it's a portfolio piece, then that's completely different. But if you're trying to build an app to make some money or just to showcase your skills and you want somebody to use it, it should always be about the user experience. So, I don't know if that was me, but so this year, I I've been kind of tinkering with this idea that I've been wanting to build for an app. And I started building it, and right around the session, I kind of had a very basic layout of what it looked like. So I thought, I'm going to go and try to get a design session with an Apple person, right? Finally got one on Thursday. I was like so excited. I was like, yeah, they're going to help me. They're going to help me make it look better. They're going to give me all these ideas. So I went and I explained to them. I said, yeah, I have this idea. This is what I have. It was a little bit less than kind of what you see up there. And the first thing they said was, it's simple. I kind of took that as a negative thing. I was like, simple? Yeah, it's simple. I just started building it. She's like, no, 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 no. By simple, I mean, it's a good thing. It's a good thing to have a simple app. Simple is good she said, when we do reviews of people's apps, we see a lot of overcomplicated apps. So when we see something that's very simple as far as navigation, she said that's a good thing. The simpler the app, the better it is. I was like, oh, okay. So then she gave me some tips. She's like, yeah, you could just add some color, add some. She kind of helped me tweak it out a little bit. I was like, oh, okay. And I'm going to share the rest of what she told me here in a little bit. The other thing they noticed was that I didn't have a lot of different packages. Most of it was just Apple frameworks, and it was built in SwiftUI. And she said, is that intentional? I said, kind of. I have a very hard time maintaining my own code. I don't want to spend time kind of making sure that other people maintain their own code and it doesn't crash my stuff. And she said, well, because you're using SwiftUI and you don't have a lot of other packages, the fact is that you have it on an iPhone now, but you could just tweak some things around. You could also have it on an iPad, on a Mac, on the watch, Vision, all because you're using Apple frameworks. I was like, that's true. She said, yeah, just little tweaks here and there. And because all the lists are always going to look like lists, forms are going to look like forms. So I was like, oh, I had never thought about that. It's always going to look the same no matter what you're displaying it on. So a couple other things I've read about. Most of them have come from me helping people not build, but use apps. So earlier this year, I was in Cupertino at Apple. They explained why apps kind of get the Apple Design Awards. And this was one of their winners. And the reason is because it's so simple to use. There's that word again, simple, right? Apple, for some reason, loves simple. As you can see, this is it. This is the whole app. It's a translation app. You can swipe up to switch between the two languages that you're translating between. You can push on the screen to do the actual translation, and you can swipe down to get to the settings. And that's it. That's the whole app. And that's why it got one of the Apple Design Awards a couple years back. And then they went through a whole bunch of other apps, but this one stuck to me. And this is probably why when I was building my own app, I stayed on the simpler side of the navigation. So when you're building something, try to keep it simple but intuitive and functional. And it's hard. It's hard, especially when you're kind of learning, because you learn things and you're like, oh, that's kind of cool. I want to add it to my app. Like I was learning on reading about charts in SwiftUI. I was like, oh, that's really cool. Can I add some charts? No, but did I want to? Yes. And so that happens to us. We learn something and we want to implement it, but we probably shouldn't. Maybe we should have an app just to do all that tinkering with and have our, production app separate. White space. That's a good one. So just because the size of our screens is the size of our phones doesn't mean we can't or shouldn't, use white space. So if you look at whatever finger it is that you use to interact with your phone and then the person next to you, we all have different size fingers, right? So looking at the one with the X, the one we shouldn't use, and assuming those balloons are our buttons, they're pretty close together. So if that was our app and those are our buttons, and we try to push on the red balloon, but we accidentally push on the yellow balloon, and now we sent our ex $100. We're gonna be pretty pissed, right? And that could have all been resolved if we had added a little bit of space in between those buttons. The other thing about white space is that one thing that they teach, and it's in every design book that you ever read, is that using white space, you can guide the focus of your user. The way you lay things out, you can make your user do whatever it is that you want them to do just on how you lay things out. So if you want your user to see something, you guide them to it with the images, with the text, with your buttons. You kind of guide them. And you make them do whatever it is you want them to do by how you lay out your stuff. Some of you remember how when PowerPoint first started to add animations and everybody used them, and we had text flying at us from all over, from the left. I don't know if that's my left. This is my left. From the left, from the right, from the top, and it zoomed and it zagged, and it was just annoying. Well, I've seen apps that do that, and they're just annoying. So if you're going to use animations in your app, use them with a purpose. Use them because you're celebrating something that the user did, or because it's they clicked the button and you're kind of making the button click. My favorite animation still to this day is when you do an activity on your watch and the circles finishes and then you get the whole circle on your watch. And then when you finish all three, you get all three. Yeah, that's probably one of my best things that I do. So, but I've seen other things. You finish a habit on a habit tracker app and you get little fireworks on your screen. It's useless. There's no point to it, but it's kind of fun. So just think about that. If you're going to do an animation on your app, have a purpose, not just because, again, because it's cool. Same thing with colors. Colors are great. They make your app stand out. But if you use too much, it tends to be overwhelming. Like this. Even color in the background can overtake whatever it is that you're trying to do. So if you're going to use color, I'd say start with black and white and then add color to maybe whatever is interactive, your button, if you have links, or maybe if you're going to highlight something in your app. I was looking for a water tracking app to start seeing how much water I actually drink. Do you know how many water tracking apps there are on the App Store? There's free ones, there's paid ones, there's ones that are a part of like a bundle of something else. Man, there was so many. So I just downloaded a whole bunch of them. I think I had like 2 pages of them on my phone. So I started kind of going through them, trying to find one that would work for me. By like the third one that I tried, I was just like, this is ridiculous. I'm not gonna get through all these and find one. So I was like, okay. So if they ask me to sign up, I'm gonna automatically delete it because I don't need to sign up for a water tracking app, really. So they asked me to sign up, gone. If it had ads that popped up every, just randomly or whenever, and there was no way to get rid of them, like paying or something, gone. So that's the thing. If you're building an app in a very dense market, don't make it hard on your user because they're just going to delete your app. If there's another app that they can go and use that's easier to use than yours, even if they have to pay for that other one, $5, $2, whatever it is, they're going to go with that app because it's easier to use than yours. I did it. I don't know how many apps I deleted. Finally found one. I ended up paying $6 for it, but it did everything it needed it to do. No ads. I didn't have to sign up. The other thing is optimize for the most common actions. Like I said, whatever it is, whatever the problem is that you're trying to solve, make that the very first thing that comes up when you open up your app. Don't make your user go through 2-3 pages to find it. If you're a bank app and the first thing your user wants to do is check their balance, make that the first thing they see. If you're a water tracking app, then make them check their water by one click of a button, not open up this and scroll to however many liters of water that they drink. Make it super, super easy for your user to do whatever it is that they need to do. Close the app and move on with their life. That's the whole point of why we're doing this. It's for a user to do something, do it easily, do it quickly, and move on. Unless it's a game, then you want them on your app forever, right? I had a bunch of text on my app, and it was black and white. And the designer did tell me this. She said, if you're going to have large blocks of text, don't use black and white. It's very, very hard to read black text on a white background or white text on a black background. She said, go for a shade of gray. If it's white text on a black background, make it a light gray. Or if white background, black text, make it dark gray. It's easier to read. And then left align for countries that do left reading, or right aligned for countries that do right reading. It just helps. It helps users read your content, and they'll actually stay longer on your app and will read the whole thing if it's easier to read. Otherwise, they'll get tired, their eyes will get strained, and they'll close your app. It's like, I did not know that. Thanks for sharing that with me. So I'm sharing it with you. Last thing, design is not about you. It's not about me. It's about our users. So just because I like blue doesn't mean I'm going to use blue in my app. I'm going to use whatever my app is a flight training app. So luckily, pilots do tend to like the color blue, so I am going to use blue in my app. But whatever it is that your users tend to prefer, that's what you guys should be using in your app. The other thing about design is that it's very, very hard to critique our own work, isn't it? I find it very hard, especially if I've been working on it for months. It's like, oh, it works. It's great. I'm done. I don't ever want to say this thing ever again. So I would recommend to have a friend, a potential user, take a look at your work and then be open to their feedback, to their critique. Don't be, defensive. Yes, you worked on this, but you want it to be the best thing that you've built. So I would say ask them for feedback and then be open to their critique. You don't have to make the changes, but listen to them. So I've got some resources that I want to share with you. I got a few here. Of course, the Human Interface Guidelines from Apple is a great one. Learn UI Design is a blog. They've got tons of articles on there. And then Android also has their own, kind of like Apple has the Human Interface Guidelines. They call theirs Material Design. I thought maybe they're going to have the same things that Apple do, but no, they have actually got different stuff, and it's actually pretty good too. There's a book called Don't Make Me Think, and it talks all about how design for everyday things was done. So if you're actually interested in how things are built, pretty good book. And then I also have a PDF with a whole bunch of links to videos. So if you're interested in that, I'll drop it in the Discord channel for this presentation. Thank you.